Here we're with Kayvon Tehranian, founder and CEO of Foundation, a platform for minting, selling, and buying non-fungible tokens. Kayvon, it's so great to have you on the Defiant podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Camilla. It's very, very good to be here.
Yay. Okay, so I'm really interested to talk about everything NFTs. Obviously, people listening to the Defiant podcast will know that this sector of crypto has been just blowing up recently. It's really kind of opened the space to a new wave of users and a new completely new use case for crypto itself. So it's a really interesting space. And Kayvon is leading one of the biggest platforms for minting these tokens. So, but first, before we get into all of that, can you tell us more about your background? Like, what were you doing before Foundation, and what led you to crypto?
Wonderful. I'll start way back, graduating from college, but I'll try to accelerate quickly into getting into where we are right now, which is I graduated actually during the financial crisis. I graduated in 2008, and that landed me basically on Wall Street in the midst of just unprecedented kind of carnage. And it was just it was really, in retrospect, such an unbelievable education because it forced me to challenge my own thinking of all these institutions and systems that we had, and how actually they worked. And that led me very quickly to kind of become very skeptical of the existing financial system. And then, as a young, kind of ambitious 20-year-old, I quickly realized that I set my sights on Silicon Valley. That felt a lot more optimistic, future focused, and honestly also just a lot more opportunity. And so I moved to California shortly thereafter, moved to Silicon Valley, worked at Google, and really spent 5 years there. And during kind of a really golden age at Google, where the company was scaling, it was doubling. The internet was just growing enormously. Businesses were forming online. And it was really, really, really just an unbelievable education and scaling and like bringing impact to the world through the internet. And then eventually, I think by the end of my 5-year time there, I really just felt excited about kind of startups and really wanting to move to a smaller context. And YC was really just front and center in kind of Silicon Valley culture, and wanting to be part of like a small team building something we were passionate about, and ended up joining a team called Universe. We built really iOS software, and the big insight that I developed there was I love startups, but I realized I wanted to be on the frontier of something really new to the internet. And if I think about my time at Google, the web was very established by the time I was at Google. By the time I was working at Universe, app stores and mobile phones were actually very well established. And so during my time at Universe, I kind of caught wind of Ethereum, and really once I started to understand what this was and what was possible, and then also realizing how nascent it was, and how much unexplored territory there was, and then also this connected to my kind of previous skepticism around the existing financial system, it just really clicked. And that's kind of, once I started falling down the rabbit hole, as they say, like I just really never stopped, and ended up connecting with Nadav at Dharma, and spent 2 years there really working on the smart contracts and the product that powered Dharma, before really leaving in the end of really starting Foundation at the beginning of 2020, with the real intent purpose of, or the thesis of, DeFi was an incredible kind of invention that was really birthed out of the past kind of previous run in Ethereum. But I really felt like Ethereum was more than just another financial system. It was something much, much, much bigger. And I really wanted to think about how to put this in the hands of creators. And I think you and I connected, Camilla. And this is not like our first time touching base. We've been working with artists for over a year now to just figure out how they can use Ethereum to really reinvent their ability to kind of sell their work, to kind of reshift a lot of the economic arrangements in the kind of cultural sphere. And that's what really we've been focused on at Foundation. And that's both the abbreviated but maybe slightly long-winded version of how I got here.
No, really interesting. Just a couple of questions there on your background. What were you doing at Google? Like, is your like education kind of more technical, or like what side of those were you handling?
I refer to my Google days as like kind of a master's degree. It really felt like going to grad school, where I was able to work, in the sales department. I worked on engineering teams. I worked with Marissa Mayer on product teams. This was definitely a phase in Google where you were still kind of getting your hands dirty in a variety of areas. And so I really had that opportunity to kind of be interdisciplinary, and I loved it. I submitted code to many of the code bases. As an engineer, I also managed products, and I also got exposure to the sales and marketing teams. And so it really gave me like a very well-rounded view of how products and tech companies work from all angles, which I think is really important, because I think often people get pigeonholed and they're like, only engineering matters, only marketing matters, only sales matters, right? And in reality, you need kind of all of those pieces to come together to really make an organization or a product or a company work.
Really interesting. And then maybe that's why you also had this more, or you come with this more global view of what matters, or of the world. So like coming into crypto, most people, I think, in at least before 2021, I would say, when they came into crypto, they came into it looking at a financial aspect first. Especially with Bitcoin, it's like, okay, like the hard money narrative, digital gold. Ethereum has been mostly kind of financial, like its main use case has been financial applications. So it's interesting that you came at Ethereum from like a completely different angle. And also in 2020, when starting Foundation in 2020, when NFTs, I mean, they weren't as trendy or making headlines like they are today. I'd love to get your perspective on that. Like
Ethereum was around $70 when I started the company. So,
true.
I mean, it was not the cool thing to do.
So like what inspired you to do that? Like to go for NFTs, to build on Ethereum? Like what made you believe like this was the place to be?
So I think this comes back to the point I was making earlier, which is I started to just connect certain dots. So like, when I was at Google, I saw the success of a company that really was early to the web. And with Universe, I was exposed to, Apple building the app store. And these were post some sort of breakthrough innovation. And what I realized is I wanted to be on the frontier of something new. And that inherently entails, going against the grain, or being alone, or being kind of seemingly weird and often in a different corner. And so I think like these moments that happen is that you connect certain dots that other people don't see, right? And I think people were like, Ethereum's just for finance, right? And then Ethereum can't even exist. You can only have Bitcoin, right? And there was just all these like narratives, and I was just very aware that these things are very malleable, and it often takes people with just an ability to see things differently, or see things from different perspectives, to try things and experiment. And that's really what we did in 2020 to put us in a position where, there's this enormous moment happening right now. And it's not that Foundation is joining in on the party. It's like we were already here. And now it's just amazing to be able to support all the people that are really excited about participating in this new economy. And I think that's the nature of being on the frontier, is you don't know exactly when you're going to strike gold. But you're out there looking for it, and looking to dig and build and kind of settle.
I love that. So really interested to get your thoughts on how this NFT craze, if you want to call it that, or excitement,
Yes.
developed. Since you've been in the space for a while, or a while in crypto terms, what do you think happened that made this thing kind of really blow up this year?
I don't think that I have to say the pandemic certainly feels related, which is I think that the pandemic forced a lot of people to reflect and pause and challenge the existing institutions and businesses that they were participating in ecosystems. And I think a lot of them were caught really flat-footed, not having innovation or new business models or online native business models that allowed artists and creators to kind of find ways to support themselves in this kind of setting, right? We were all kind of pushed online. We were all pushed out of our own kind of routines. And I think it caused a lot of people to question their ways of doing their practices or their careers. And I think in that questioning, it became much more palatable and much more open. People became more open-minded to new paradigms. And what they found in crypto was something I think very, very substantive, which is we can use, online, digital, global currencies to interact with each other. We can use smart contracts to mediate those interactions, and then we can really we can participate in online ways that we didn't think before, right? And so, you're watching really powerful things happen now, where you have Ethiopian artists, selling their work online to a global audience with a global cryptocurrency. That actually is really revolutionary and radical. And moreover, the smart contracts are programmable. And so they can kind of program lots and lots of features that we kind of can't have in the physical world. And so those tokens can track, these artworks can be easily tracked, their ownership can be recorded, their provenance recorded, and then their royalties can be rewarded based on whenever they sell. Auctions can take place around the world at any time of day. There's just a lot of really cool features unlocked by this technology. And I think people really woke up to it, and they needed to, because they had to find new innovative ways to support themselves.
So interesting, how I do think the pandemic also played a part in just the overall crypto rally. People being at home online, it just you start to realize our world is online. Like, we need a more internet native way of transacting value and of expressing ourselves. So I think that's kind of where NFTs fall. So I'd love to, tell us more about Foundation itself. Like, what does it actually do?
So it's actually very simple by design. It's not. It's like, I would really encourage everyone in the audience to literally go to foundation.app right now and dive in. Like, it really should make sense. Like and I think that's why you're seeing it be so successful, especially for a crypto app. Is like, it allows you to take a wallet, connect your wallet to the site, and it allows you to kind of build a following or follow artists, creators creating NFTs. Those creators can mint NFTs onto the platform, build a profile, build a collection, and then sell those pieces in auction to collectors. And it's really fun. It's you're participating in auctions. You don't know if you're going to win. You really have to place the highest bid. The highest bidder wins. It all happens in Ethereum, on Ethereum. It's all kind of done through smart contracts and kind of decentralized wallets. And so it's this very crypto native experience, but it's also very visual and very beautiful. You go to it, you're seeing incredible artwork, you're seeing incredible diversity of artwork. You're seeing creators from around the world participate in a kind of a global market now. And they're doing so in a currency that spans borders. And so you're seeing people in Brazil transact with people in Japan and Amsterdam and Tokyo and Ghana and it's effortless, right? If you have internet, it works. And it's really, it's something to behold. And I think everyone, the reason why there's so much excitement in the room is I think we all know that this is something that just got started. The smart contracts are still very primitive. There's a lot more we can do. And if we all know this, like, value takes a while to accrue. And so a lot of the things that are being created right now are going to be a lot more valuable in the future. We just don't know it yet. And I think it's a really exciting time. And all of this takes place on foundation.app. And, it's something that's really designed to be used by as many people as possible. And I think the fun thing to share is, like, we are a crypto native app. We don't abstract anything away. And, we're growing, our user base is growing very rapidly. We're not, we have, we're in almost in the hundreds of thousands of users with this app.
And that's hundreds of thousands of users who, how do you measure that? Who have
connected a wallet to the app.
Okay. Not necessarily bought a piece.
No, that's still in the tens of thousands.
Okay. And then I want to talk about the mechanism that you have to curate or get, high quality art in your platform, because I think maybe that's one interesting difference with other NFT platforms. And I'd love for you to dive into that. Like, what do you see Foundation is kind of differentiating a feature and yeah, just dive into kind of this mechanics of, I think it's artists are in the platform can invite other artists, and that's kind of the way that you're able to mint on the platform, right?
Correct. So, to date, there's been basically like kind of two polarities. It's like either there's some sort of centralized admin control that like guards who has access, and it's really kind of seen as curation. And then there's kind of the wild west of like, it's open, anyone can do it, and good luck, and it's chaotic. And I think what we really saw was, we believe in curation. We believe in surfacing signal and giving you context and making you feel like there's a there, right? And not just making it really kind of feel like it's just lawless or wild. But on the other hand, I don't think the team feels qualified to curate the world's art. I think that's an incredibly preposterous kind of assumption that like a centralized team would know to curate everybody. And so what we really did is we've just been trying to seed pockets of curation. So we've gone out there and we started with 50 artists, actually. I mean, we didn't expect this to grow so fast. I think it just shows you the power of giving people really well-designed tools and real intent. Because, we've then let those 50 artists invite other artists. And then those artists invited other artists. And then those artists invited other artists. And now the network's just grown to the point where there's, I think we're over 10,000 artists, on the platform. And then the fun thing is like, you can see who invited who and who knows who, and it's social, right? Even though it's crypto, it's really fundamentally social, right? And I think that's the thing that creates context for NFTs, because technically anyone can mint anything, right? Like, without the context of who did it, you're missing that additional layer. And so that's something that we really care about. And so I think of it as neither centralized nor chaotic. That's really what we tried to like find the balance between. And if you really think about what an invite system is, it's peer-to-peer, right? Everyone's given the same kind of ability as someone else, and they're empowered to use that power to grow the network. And I think peer-to-peer is the like, I don't think chaos is an answer. I don't think like everyone just having uncontrolled access to something creates structure. But I also think, I'm very bought into peer-to-peer, right? So like, let's build something together peer-to-peer. And that to me aligns with the ethos of crypto.
I think that it's an interesting concept, and it's certainly, I mean, just by looking at your site, it like everything looks beautiful. So in that sense, it's working. But I wonder, how do you see this this maybe need to balance with making sure that good artists everywhere that might be not connected to the networks that like current artists are connected? How do you make sure that they also have the ability to get on the platform?
I think that's the community's job. Like that's where I think the word community matters, which is our team is focused on that. We're constantly like, we have, more than, I mean, almost half the team is not technical, as in like they're not working on like they're not writing code, they're not building a product, like they're working on the community, or they're talking to collectors, they're talking to artists. So we're always plugged into these conversations, and we're very actively, going to any sort of community where perhaps they're underrepresented, right? And making sure that the invite system gets embedded into those communities so it can grow there. And then we also empower the community to go find those places themselves, right? And so there's people like Diane Sinclair. I don't know if you've seen her on Twitter, but she's been really onboarding Black women into the NFT space and like making that her mission. It's like I'm our team is passionate about that, but what's even better than our team is like finding people in that community who can do that, authentically and full time. And so, she's doing that. And so you're seeing, Ethiopian artists join, and then they're empowered to kind of help onboard the Ethiopian art world. Right. And so I think this is just a matter of time. I mean, I think that's how viral coefficients work. And I think like, it's something we care about, and it's actively changing. And I'm watching everyone kind of critique, like, how can we incorporate this community or that community? And as soon as that critique's out, someone's working to make sure that those people are onboarded, right? And so it's almost like this like very powerful self-correcting mechanism, which I think speaks to decentralization, right? Which is like, you don't have to file a ticket with our team to get going. The community can actually get going themselves.
And what I think what the system has generated, this kind of invite system, is that being on foundation is kind of a very high signal of legitimacy. It's like, okay, like this artist is legit. Like they were able to get an invite to be recognized by other artists, and so now they were able to mint an NFT here. And those signals are so sought after that I'll tell you an anecdote. But yes. someone came up to me on Discord offering a foundation invite, offering to like sell me a foundation invite. I don't know if they actually were an artist. I don't know. I think that it was most probably a scam. I don't know if they actually had a foundation invite.
I would encourage anyone listening that if anyone is buying or selling an invite, that is certainly a scam. And if that got reported to our community, they would be banned. So it's not something we accept. And then I think this is the hard part about crypto, and I imagine you're very familiar with it, Camilla, which is like, when money is involved, especially like kind of this global cryptocurrency that has, irreversible transactions, people are very aggressive in trying to find holes. And that's just the unfortunate part about crypto. But again, the community is very self-healing, right? Mm-hmm. Where they're very actively like, people are in our Discord, for example, and there's just very active community members ensuring that anyone caught doing this is kind of really immediately, banned and revoked from having access to, whether or not it is they got into our system or the Discord. And I think it's always a challenge, but I also will hope that we do get to the point where the technology and the platform are large enough to accommodate a lot of people, and there isn't actually this need to sell an invite. It doesn't make sense to me.
Right. Makes sense. I wanted to get more into kind of the weeds of the mechanics behind foundation. Like, how does the pricing mechanism work? I also wanted to ask you about secondary sales. Like, do artists get a commission or a fee in the secondary market? All of that process.
So right now, the format that we use on Foundation that I think we've really kind of become synonymous with is a reserve auction system. And so a reserve auction system is entirely on the blockchain. A creator would mint an NFT with us, and then they would list it for auction. And so those are separate actions, right? So minting an NFT is creating the NFT, it's creating the token. And then listing it is putting it into a smart contract that manages an auction on the blockchain. And what does an auction on a blockchain entail? There's a reserve price. So the reserve price is set by the artist. So they're saying, I'm willing to sell this piece for this price. And then if someone were to meet that reserve, we start a countdown timer, and we basically let, through the smart contract, we give anyone else in the world the opportunity 24 hours to outbid that other person. And so it creates a really strong dynamic where the artist sets the price, right? So they're telling you, like, look, I'm going to sell this NFT for this price. They escrow the NFT in the smart contract when they put it up for auction, so you know it's there, right? So if you place a bid, the NFT is there. And then when the collector places the bid above or meets the reserve, it also escrows the bid. And so it's just this very trustless, decentralized kind of mechanic that allows people to kind of interact on the internet without having to, engage in a complicated financial transaction. And so, once the auction's going, the NFT is escrowed. It's going to be guaranteed to be sold, and the bids are guaranteed to be escrowed, and they can't be revoked. And then the auction has rules. So it's like, if you come in and bid higher, the previous bid's removed and the new bid's placed. And so it's really, really elegant. It's very powerful, and it gives time constraints. So if you're a collector and you meet the reserve, you know that there's going to be a resolution to that auction that day. And then if you're an artist or a creator, you know that the auction will have certain rules that will be applied, and anyone in the world can participate. So I think it's very powerful. It's very elegant. It's actually very simple in some ways. It's not, I think, like, it reminds me of Uniswap, right? Where, there's all these complicated ways to do dexes, right? But I think you actually want to distill something down to be very simple and powerful. And I think what you've seen is the reserve auction mechanic just take off, right? Because it lets collectors and artists interact in the simplest way and get the best price.
Interesting. How does that compare with other markets? Like, is this different from what other NFT marketplaces do?
So, I think that it's really around the simplicity and design. I think other NFT marketplaces have just a variety of things going on. And some of them have different mechanics, and some of them, combined mechanics, and some say you can buy it now, and some say you can make offers, and some say you can put it up for auction, and some have timers and some don't. And I think what that does is it makes it confusing, and it makes it difficult to understand what's happening. Whereas on Foundation, it's always it's very clear. There's a price. If you meet the price, it opens the auction for 24 hours. Anyone who places the highest bid that time wins. And I think that that's really, really, really powerful.
And then about the secondary market, do artists get a percentage of those sales?
Absolutely. I think that is it's the most critical and misunderstood part of this. And the reason it's misunderstood is because it actually takes a long time for this feature to be really valuable. Because if you think about it, we're going to need to have appreciation of artworks, and that happens over the artist's career. It's not something that happens in 2 months. And so, yes, there's a 10% royalty encoded in all secondary sales on Foundation. So an artist will, for the lifetime of the work, receive a 10% royalty to their wallet. But I think that the really important thing to understand here is you will be writing about this in 10 years. That's when this will get really interesting, because what happens when an artist sells something for 1 ETH today that sells for 1,000 ETH in 10 years, right? Because, Basquiat's didn't, during his lifetime, it took a long time for them to become valuable. Jackson Pollock's, all of these pieces, they took time, and that royalty is going to be huge when these prices get into the millions of dollars, right? Because think about it, if something gets sold for $1 million, that royalty is $100,000, right? And that's really, really powerful. And so secondaries are really important. It's a breakthrough innovation. It's what's going to hold this whole economy together. But it's also something that I don't know how to explain this to people, because we're going to need to wait for a lot of these secondary markets to take off. And I think everyone's expecting them to just happen right now. But I don't know why. I mean, outside of some kind of fun trading or flipping, in reality, the really big sales will take many, many, many years. And I think the really good artists know and understand this, right? It's what artist shows up and is oh man, I wish my secondary market would 100x. It's that's not a normal thing. It that has to happen over the arc of a career, as that work is understood and as it's appreciated. And so I think this is it's interesting because it's a new element to crypto, which is patience, right? It's not immediate. If you actually think about buying an NFT, you're buying something you're not trading a token on Uniswap. You are buying something that I think is much more long term, and it's much more of an investment in someone's career than a token on Uniswap.
Yeah. Really interesting stuff, and yes, super valuable to have this kind of baked into the contract. And we'll see how crypto feels about patience. I don't think that's a core virtue of this space.
No, but I think that it's fun though, because I think crypto is changing. I think it's constantly growing, and I think you mentioned there are a lot of new people here, right? Yeah. And I think we should remember that there's new audiences and new cohorts, and there's new types of people, and I agree with you that it hasn't been necessarily its core virtue, but I also think crypto's vision is to become a layer to the internet, in which case every type of person is here, and so different markets will appeal to different personalities.
Yeah, for sure. What does Foundation take a fee on these sales? What does Foundation get out of it?
So we take 15% on primary sales, and we take 5% on secondary sales. And then the beauty of that is it's all encoded in the smart contract. So all of this is automated, and no matter who we're talking to and no matter who you are, the fees are the same. And I think that's also amazing. In which case we can offer the same tools we're offering the world's premier artists, we're letting kind of the new artists use. And I think that's really, really, really powerful. If you look at a Sotheby's or a Christies, it's those are the auction houses we all know. And, we run multi-million-dollar auctions with the same system and the same tools that we give to, the teenagers that are kind of inventing the new trends. And so I think that's another powerful part about crypto.
So you mentioned, Basquiat, Jackson Pollock, all these great artists, and how the paradigm has shifted with these new tools. Do you think the next Basquiat will be selling NFTs? Will be tokenizing their art? Do you think
yes.
This is kind of the next frontier? Yeah,
undoubtedly. And I don't even think that's controversial anymore. I think maybe if we had this interview 3 months ago, but you're already having Christies and Phillips and Sotheby's, they're all here. It's really, it's the ship has sailed on that narrative, which is oh, is it happening? Is it not? It's it's really now how does this play out? I don't think it's an if. And I actually will say, I think a lot of these, I would imagine a lot of the artists on Foundation already are those next people.
Interesting. What do you think about Christies and Sotheby's, traditional auction houses getting into this space?
I don't think about it too much. I really focus on what we're doing. I don't know to what extent they understand the technology or technology in general. And so I think it'll just be interesting to understand what role they want to play in the space. And I think on our end, we cover the full gamut. We're an engineering team, we're a design team, we're a brand team, we have creator relations, we have collector relations, we have editorial. So this is something where we really see ourselves as something very relevant in every category. We're not just writing smart contracts, right? We're designing the experience on top of the smart contracts. We're telling the stories of the artists. We're building out relationships with prominent collectors in the space. And I think that's like we just focus on our community and our value. It's hard for me to speak to what other people are doing. Other than I just would want them to really engage with the space and the technology, authentically, right? And not try to warp it in a way that it's not meant to be used.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. It does seem to me like from the outside that their involvement has been very much kind of detached from the rest of the space. But we'll see how that evolves.
And I hope that their clientele would understand that, you want things on chain. You want the record of the bid on chain. You want to be using cryptocurrency because that's what is required. Like if you're buying an NFT, an NFT lives on a blockchain, right? It doesn't live outside of the blockchain. And so that's why I think it's important to really understand what is happening. What is an NFT? Where does it come from? And I personally believe that like Foundation offers the kind of most authentic experience. And I think that's why you're seeing, DAOs really choose us as their platform, as they're building out their collection, these, prominent DAOs in the space, because every action is recorded on the blockchain. All the auctions happen on the blockchain. Anyone in the world can participate. So when you talk about price discovery, right, anyone was able to participate in the high profile auctions on Foundation, right? Anyone that can create a wallet, anyone can get ETH, anyone can place a bid. And I think that that's really, really, really powerful when we speak about crypto and NFTs and what they represent, right? In terms of values.
No, that's a great point. So about that, you wrote this great opinion piece in the Defiant a few months ago. Crypto wants to be seen, and I think it spoke to a lot of people because it was about how there's this conception or misconception by Ethereum or blockchain app developers that you have to abstract away the blockchain and the crypto so it can reach the mainstream user. But you said actually no, like we want to have crypto front and center. We want people to know that this is a blockchain application. And you said that you're kind of leaning into this and making sure that Foundation is as crypto native as possible. But how do you do that and also try to, bring in a wider number of people? Like how do you balance those two things?
I think that this stems with good design, or it starts with good design, which is good design knows what to abstract. And I think that article, what it was really trying to express was, blockchains have properties to them that are fundamental. So if you abstract them, you lose those properties. And so if you don't give users control of their wallets, it's not non-custodial, right? You do hold on to people's data and information and funds. And that's problematic for all the reasons why we're using blockchains, right? And then if you don't give people access to the underlying data, you're building lock-in through data ownership, right? And we know where that goes with platforms. And so all these value props that we know we want, if we try to abstract these core tenets away, we end up in the same place that we kind of wanted to get away from, right? And so I think that it's really, you cannot abstract the core tenets and the core elements and not end up in places that are compromised. And when you end up in places in compromise, like what's the point of using a blockchain, right? You like lose that very quickly. And so I think that was the big nuance to that blog post, and I stand by it. And what I would say is you need to build products and experiences that justify the learning curves and the learning edges around using blockchains. And what I would tell you is Foundation is not suffering from a lack of growth because it doesn't have abstraction. You're watching artists and collectors join the platform more so every day. And they're learning and they're teaching each other why it's valuable that it works in a certain way. And it might not be perfectly smooth, and there might be misunderstandings, and there might be tensions in the community, but I'm watching the knowledge transmit to a larger group of people every day. And that's really important. And I think that comes down to not patronizing your users, right? If we're going to live in a world where people control their funds and control their data, right? They're going to have to learn how to use this technology, and they do want those things. And you have to just build experiences that justify it. And that's the way I think about it. And every day, I think more and more people are learning about this. And I think, like Camilla, I don't know when this will happen, but I think we will get to a point pretty soon where a lot of people start saying, like, why aren't you asking me to connect my wallet? Like, why do I have to log in with this other way that I don't have control over what I'm doing? Right. I think that's going to start feeling weirder than, why are you asking me to why are you asking me to connect a wallet? What is that? Right.
Totally. Like I 100% kind of see that. As you were saying, like it made so much sense to me, because right now, like I feel so much more comfortable using applications where I connect my wallet instead of like having to log in. So as this becomes more commonplace and more people become comfortable with this kind of Web3 native way of interacting, it just makes sense that it's kind of what you expect from applications on the internet. So, okay, about this growth. So you've obviously kind of done spectacularly well. You're among the top 10 NFT platforms by volume. Is your goal kind of to climb to the like top NFT platform? And if yes, what's your strategy to get there?
We don't wake up every day and look at the top 10 and think about how to get to the top place, because I think that it's all so early. And so if you really just focus on competition, you can often get very confused or lost, because a lot of the things that are popping up are very different from us. They have very different properties or trade-offs or communities. And so it really, for us, isn't about competition. To me, we're moving to a world, and I don't know what the exact timeline is, but everything online will be an NFT, right? And I think like in that world, these rankings and these charts become very meaningless, right? Because we're really fundamentally just moving into like a new internet, right? A new version of the internet. And that's the way we think about it. And so we're really just trying to steward like a kind of a cultural platform as we move into this kind of new internet. And we're really, really trying to just focus on the categories we care about, the creators we care about, and forming a strong community that has like an identity. And I think that just will naturally prove out to be quite competitive. But it's not something that we look to kind of leaderboards to guide us. I think they're always changing. A lot of the projects that bubble up, I think they have a lot of cool properties to them, but I don't know if some of them have long-term, dynamics to them. I think a lot of the very hot NFT collectibles, I think they're very fun, but how many of them will be around in 10 years? Right? I don't know. And it's not even my place to say which ones will, but I will say that good art, culture, the art that will live on, 10 years is nothing, right? How many of us go and see Picassos and Rembrandts and all of these, very, very these are we have art that's hundreds and thousands of years old, right? And so I just kind of think about it in that lens. And I think we just let those values kind of guide us, not necessarily the leaderboard.
Makes sense. I'd love for you to talk more about this new internet that you mentioned, where everything is an NFT. Like, how does that look like?
I mean, I think I don't, I think your audience will get there, because this isn't how I would talk about foundation. I think this is really just about like the bigger like tectonic shifts that are happening, which is, the way to think about blockchains is they're adding property rights to the internet, right? And it's like a whole new layer to the internet, where it's like, instead of all these objects floating around freely and anyone can copy them and move them and you don't know who did what, we're going to move to a world where like everything has an owner and everything has an origin, and everyone is kind of, there's a whole system of payments that are going to be attributed based on these kind of connections. And all of that's going to be on a blockchain, and that blockchain is not going to be owned or controlled by anybody. And it'll just be all these different experiences and platforms plugging into them. And I think that is really, that's the vision of, that's the vision that we subscribe to, and that's how we're thinking about the world. And I think the complexity is that's a long-term vision. That's not like tomorrow. And, I think we all know that Ethereum needs to be upgraded substantially to be able to handle that. And, the user experience of wallets has to be improved, and transaction costs are way too high, and all these things, right? But we all know that technology solves these problems, right? These aren't like, unsolvable problems. So it's like, we are building the product that works right now with the understanding of where this is going in the future, is the way I think about it.
Perfect.
And that's why everything we do is crypto native, right? It's like, that's why we put everything on chain. That's why we do have you have your own wallet, right? These are decisions that will be true no matter what, right? And even though gas costs are high right now, that just means that what you're minting needs to be particularly valuable, and the product speaks to that. And in the future, there will be experiences where, the costs aren't so high.
Right. So about that, like, are you considering going to like using a scaling solution?
So we have experience here. We're not like, we did play with XDAI in 2020. And I think the thing that I would just challenge the Ethereum community is like, it's just not a matter of a scaling solution. Like, we have lots of scaling solutions out there, right? It's a matter of consensus within the community, because if you're going to go to a scaling solution, there are trade-offs being made to scale, right? And the community has to want to make those trade-offs together. It's not just like, oh, we decided we like those trade-offs, and so we're going to go there. And there isn't a clear place right now, because otherwise all you're doing is fracturing the liquidity that's available for the market. And then you're also adding more friction to the user experience. And unless the full community is behind these decisions, it just becomes really, really challenging. And I think as a platform, we learned it's not up to us, right? It's not just like we get to decide. It has to be something that the Ethereum community, right, which we're just very plugged into, really decides as a whole. Like, everyone's excited about optimism. Well, optimism has to get to the point where it has the level of adoption where, we can move our market there, and artists don't suffer, or collectors don't suffer, or the user experience doesn't suffer because everyone's bought into using optimism, right? And so that's going to be just really a challenge for the Ethereum community as a whole, not really us as a platform. And that's what we really learned by experimenting with L2 in 2020.
Okay, so you're waiting until there's just significant volume and liquidity in one scaling solution as a sign of, okay, like the community has made a decision that they are trusting these trade-offs, whatever they may be.
And we're not going to put our artists or collectors at risk until like that's clear, because otherwise we're not stewarding the community, our community well, because all of these things have trade-offs, and these trade-offs have to be really, I do believe in the Ethereum community's wisdom around understanding these trade-offs and choosing the right one.
Okay. And with like around 5 billion in Polygon, do you think that's you still kind of wait and see on that?
I mean, I'm excited about, like, don't get me wrong, I'm excited, but like, is everyone ready to go to Polygon? Like, how much ETH will go to Polygon, right? And so and what is the relationship between Polygon and optimism? And then how are all these things going to interoperate? These are still open questions, and we're paying attention. And I think when we really need clarity, though, I think people underestimate how much friction, we're onboarding so many people just using wallets. Now you want them to really change networks within their wallets. Like every point has friction, and we have to justify it with real value.
Yeah, makes sense. And then to start wrapping up in this kind of Web3 future, how do NFTs interact with DeFi?
I'm very excited for this. I think NFTs have proven themselves to be just a category in their own right. And then the beauty of blockchains is composability. And I think you're going to see, and I'm already super aware of 10 projects at least that are going to go and figure out cool ways to go and combine these. Is how can we use DeFi to really improve the experience around NFTs? And so a few things that I am aware of is like there are DAOs forming that are collecting NFTs that are then holding them on as like a collection that they're then tokenizing and then trading as a token on Uniswap, right? And so the token essentially is access to the collection. And so you can think of the token as a proxy for the price of the collection, right? I think that is wild. I think DAOs in and of themselves and how collectively people are coming together to build collections, right? I think that's the new institution. Instead of waiting for kind of the old world to come online, I think people are going to build new institutions and they're going to be DAOs. And then I think you're going to see all sorts of really interesting pricing mechanics to help create liquidity, create loans, create all sorts of financial use cases for NFTs. How to look at the royalty structures around them and to think about advances. And I think it's a really new world. And I think there is a lot of hype, but I think you've been through this, Camilla. It's like, people might get over excited, but the builders are going to be here building these experiences for the next couple of years. And it's going to be, I think that the analog world won't even it just will be blown away by what's built in the next couple of years.
Yeah, possibilities are, not endless, but almost. There's so much you can do there, like NFTs as collateral to borrow against, maybe tokenizing for royalty, in like revenue, using it as like maybe some sort of like supply chain kind of financing against NFTs. I don't know. Yeah, there's like so much you can do with DeFi. I'm plugging NFTs in. Okay, and then now we really have to wrap up. But I'm curious about your like big vision for Foundation. Like how, like what's the place of Foundation in this this crypto native future, like 20 years from now? How do you see it grow?
So I think it really just relates to the metaverse, and I would encourage people to look at our blog and dive into some of these topics like a little bit more deeply. But I think about the metaverse, and the metaverse is this kind of the space that we're creating that's kind of governed by blockchains, where there isn't a single entity that like is in control and doesn't, like, the data floats freely, right? That's what I think of as the metaverse. And I think Foundation is just going to be one of the premier portals that people like enter the metaverse through. And I think like the way I think about it is we're very pragmatic in the present, which is this is all still very new. We have to onboard people and provide an experience that's beautiful and well designed. But I think, as we all know, this is radically moving forward. And we are going to move into a world where Web3 is the predominant, predominant kind of layer to the web. Like I think like Web2 websites will start to feel, very old and silly compared to ones where you connect your wallet and move your data and funds around freely. And I see us, really getting into a place where, there isn't one foundation kind of site, there's a foundation ecosystem and it's a portal, and it kind of gives you these powers to go into the metaverse and feel empowered to participate. And I think that's abstract, and that's why it's the big long-term vision, because we'll make that concrete year after year by working on kind of the next big thing in crypto.
Okay, really interesting. So not a website, but sort of like an ecosystem, like a portal, a virtual reality sort of thing. Like I imagine some sort of gallery experience or something like that. I think
that there's a lot to come, is the way I think about it. And I think the challenge is sequencing it all. And I think we already see lots of glimpses of this future right now. And I think what we're really just trying to do is sequence it so we get as many people through the portal as possible.
Interesting. All right. Okay. I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much for joining me. This was a super interesting conversation, Kayvon.
Thank you, Camilla. It's always a pleasure.